Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
Welcome to Crosspointe.
We are an inclusive faith community
seeking to live out the loving, just, and generous way of Jesus.
We are participants in a long tradition.
It's less concerned with doctrines and dogma that demand total agreement,
but a life to be lived, enjoyed, and given away to others.
What unites us is a growing awareness that life is precious.
That we are made by love in order to love.
This community is comprised of and affirms the entire human family,
regardless of race, age, creed,
physical abilities, marital or economic status,
gender identity, or sexual orientation.
So, if you're curious and have come to see,
if you are tired and have come to rest,
if you are grateful and have come to share,
if you are wounded and have come to heal,
if you're joyful and have come to celebrate,
if you are uprooted and have come to belong,
welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Good morning, Crosspointe. We continue to be so grateful for you and so excited that we can join you virtually in this way. As we continue to find ways to connect in our isolation, we want to let you know about a few things. First, if you're a high schooler or if you're a parent of a high schooler, our student ministry is kicking off something exciting tonight. At 6:30 p.m. via Zoom, Student Ministries will kick off High School Rhythm Remix live. So if you're a high schooler, you're not going to want to miss out. This is an opportunity for students to connect, to worship together, to listen to some really relevant teaching. It's a place for students to connect in their small groups as well. And like any good remix, there's some new elements that have been added in, so you're not going to want to miss it. You can find links to this on our Crosspointe High School Ministries webpage and on our social media pages at crosspoinths. You can also email students at crosspointe.org if you need some more information. Also, if you're a high schooler or middle schooler, or a parent of one, and you would like to be a part of small groups in student ministry, you need to sign up. And you can do that in the same places, Crosspointe High School student ministry pages and middle school ministry pages, and you'll find links to sign up for your small groups there. And we know that students aren't the only ones that need to connect right now. So adults, if you're interested in building some community and having conversations about faith in a small group context, we invite you to join life groups. We have signups available for one more week, and you can find out all about registering, more information about each group at crosspointe.org/lifegroups. And lastly, we are so excited about the ways that you continue to allow us to partner with our community, and we do that through your contributions that you give. Each and every week, we continue to not only be able to offer programming to students and adults and children and families, but we also are able to continue to pay bills for individuals and families within our community. And I'm excited to announce that this past week, because of the things that you've given, we were able to provide school supplies to 3 local schools, 3 elementary schools and 1 middle school. And those school supplies will be separated and given out by teachers and administrations of those schools to students who need them most. We're so grateful to be able to partner with you in this way. And we want to let you know that if you want to continue to partner with Crosspointe financially, you can do that online at crosspointe.org/contribute. And you can also text Crosspointe NC to 77977. Really grateful for you and all that you do. Thanks, Crosspointe.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness, morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great time and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above, joined with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy, and love. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me.
Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime with no witness to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your surroundings. Surely even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence, and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and invite you. And the tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you.
thick and thin. We're all in this together, in the losses and the wins. In the light of day, there's always a place to love the world we share. When the ones we love need the best of us, we'll find each other there. We're all in this together, through the sun and the rain. We're all in this together, in the laughter and the pain. When the tears are cried on that darkest night, we'll hold the ones we love. When we finally see all that beauty, we'll sing that grateful song. In the light of day, there's always a place to love the world we share. When the ones we love need the best of us, we'll find each other there. In the light of day, there's always a place to love the world we share. When the ones we love need the best of us, we'll find each other there.
Today we're continuing our series, Don't Believe Your Eye. And today's installment, I'm going to sort of open a can of worms for some of us, which is a good thing, because I believe there's an idea running in the background, several ideas like this running in the background that they cause us a lot of problems by them never being pulled to the foreground and have the lights thrown on so that we can actually see and ask some questions that we maybe didn't feel the liberty to ask. And so while I can't possibly deal exhaustively with the ideas that I want to talk about today, and you couldn't do it in a single message or probably even in a single series, and no matter what I say, it's not going to be satisfactory for everybody. But my sincere hope is that maybe what I'll share today will shift our thinking just a little bit, and the result, I believe, will be more peace, more love, more freedom. And so in order to do that, I want to start with a couple of stories that many of you, if you've been at Crosspointe for any length of time, you've heard me tell before. Some of you, you've heard me tell these stories multiple times. Others of you, many others of you, you haven't heard these stories before. So if you've heard them, give me a break. I've only got so many stories, and these are really dear to me. So in my early 20s, I had a job, and one of my coworkers, her name was Jane, and we started talking about faith and exchanging ideas. And it was really important for me to tell her all the things that I was, intellectually superior about. And I didn't believe. I didn't really have any sort of belief system that I could articulate. It was more about what I didn't believe. And at one point, and she's just the sweetest human being I'd ever met. And she had this great Southern Ohio accent. And at one point, she just sort of stopped, took a breath, and she said, "Steve, are you saved?" And I laughed at her, and I didn't mean to laugh at her. I was laughing in sort of this condescending, haven't you been paying attention for the last half hour? That question doesn't apply to me. And what I said was, Jane, no offense, but I don't believe in that stuff. And she said something that blew my mind. She said, well, have you ever stopped, still in this Southern Ohio accent, have you ever stopped to think that maybe a thing doesn't need you to believe in it in order for it to be true? And I had never come across an idea like that before. This idea that reality doesn't require my consent for it to be. And then she handed me a tract, one of those little trifold pamphlets about Jesus.
And I read it. I actually started reading it on my way home, driving home, and pulled over and finished it. And I had never read anything like it before. Because it talked about friendship with the Spirit of Christ, friendship, interactive relating with the divine, that Jesus wants to be your friend. I had never come across any of those ideas before. And it absolutely threw a door open inside of me that had felt closed, and I didn't even realize it felt closed. So fast forward several months, and I'm engaged, and Christy and I were looking for a place to get married. We went to 2 churches one Sunday morning. Never been to church together. Now we've gone to church twice on the same Sunday. The first one was really weird. The second one was closer to where we wanted to live. And we walk in, and we met this young, cute, newlywed couple named Jonathan and Adrian. So that's where we met Crosspointe's lead pastor, Jonathan and Adrian, up in southern Ohio, or southern Dayton in Ohio. And went through the service, and were really grabbed by the service, and something was happening. Christy and I we parked temporarily to ask about being married, and left wet. We got baptized that day, and I still wasn't even entirely sure what we had just done, and my brain was all over the place. But like I said, some doors were opened. Well, we were hanging out, Jonathan and I, and he gave me a book that explained in some parables love and grace, inclusion, acceptance. And he said it will have an impact on you. And so I put it on a side table for about two weeks. I didn't read it. And one evening I was watching some show. I think I tell people I was watching something like Shark Week. I don't know what it was. Whatever it was, I had seen it before. And so as it started, I muted I didn't turn it off. I just muted it and thought, I'll just go ahead and read this little thin book, And I read the whole thing in one setting. And I closed it, and it did have an impact on me. But I was still had a bunch of questions, I still felt like it was required of me to crack some code about grace and love and inclusion and all that. So I'm just kind of staring down. I set the book down, and I look up, and in the time that I had muted the television and watched and read this book, the programming had shifted. And I don't know what the new show was what it was about, but there, muted on the screen when I finally looked up, was a picture of Jesus with his arms like this, some painting of Jesus. And I was moved. I actually I couldn't help it. I dropped right to my knees right there on the apartment carpet and said, I'm all in. And I was invited into something in that moment, and thus started a whole new way of being Steve Doherty. And just a couple years after that, I was a full-time pastor, which was really weird for me and weird for my friends that I used to hang out with. Doherty's a pastor now. What happened? But what seemed to make it feel less weird to me was to be rigid about it and to start applying the tactics of us and them. And what I did was I made salvation about something that me and others like me that had included me. Salvation was something that my group had narrowly figured out, but that most other people would find was elusive. They would never get it. And it would be several years of doing that before I would look back and realize that tract never gave me an ultimatum. There was never friendship with Jesus or else. There was no ultimatums or threats or anything like that. There was no sense of threat or warning in this image of Christ, in this mystical moment that just pierced me all the way through. There was none of that. But those were the tactics I employed. It would be several years before I would look back and say, I answered a call, an invitation of open arms with folded arms. And then I went around telling everybody, perpetuating a cosmic ultimatum. A ministry of threat, dressed up in the language of love. I was taking part in an understanding of Jesus that uses the language of love and of kingdom and all that, but it was actually about worry. It was actually about the breakdown of any possibility of peace. It was a very sophisticated worrying structure. I was talking about being saved, but I was actually engaged in something that kept me and those around me stuck and trapped. Now, if I were to come over to your house and ask you, when you think about being rescued or saved, when you think about that illustrative language, of being rescued. What is something you could be rescued from? I would be willing to bet that you would say things like you could be rescued from a burning building or a burning car, or you could be rescued from a sinking ship. You can be rescued from being kidnapped. You can be rescued from some really awful disease. Those are things that you could be rescued or saved from. But I'm very confident that very few people, or maybe nobody, would say that being saved would bring about the idea of being saved from being sent into a burning building, saved from being put in a burning car, saved from being given a terminally ill disease, being saved from being put on a sinking ship. That would be a different set of metaphors where we would talk about being diverted. To be saved is different than being diverted in very important ways. When we're saved from something, we sort of have a fundamental understanding that we're being saved from circumstances that are already true, or else this metaphor of salvation would be about diversion. Have you trusted Jesus to divert you? Do you have a rerouting relationship with Jesus? See, being saved is about where we already are. It's already happening. It's not an ultimatum. It's an invitation. To be saved is an extended hand. Which brings me to how Peter ended the very first sermon recorded in Acts chapter 2. He's preached a pretty long sermon. There's Jewish people from all over the area. They've all descended on Jerusalem. And so there's this ready-made audience, and he preaches this sermon. And at the end of it, in verse 36, he says this: "Therefore, let the entire house of Israel know." Remember, the good news is always for the Jew first, and then for everybody else, the Gentile. It always started with Jesus' tradition and then radiates outward from there. So Peter says, "Therefore, let the entire house of Israel know with certainty that God has made him, Jesus, both Lord and Messiah, the Jesus whom you crucified." He sort of lays the blame on the entire group of people who were expecting the Messiah. The one you were waiting for, you had it so stuck in your mind that he was going to look like something else that you inadvertently killed the Son of God. Now, when they heard this, verse 37, they were cut to the heart and said to Peter and the other apostles, "Oh my gosh, brothers, what do we do? What should we do? How do we respond?" And Peter said to them, "Repent," or as we might say today, wake up. Wake up and be immersed, be baptized, every one of you, into the name, the reputation, the way of Jesus the Christ, so that your sins may be forgiven and you will receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. This is a huge statement to make to a bunch of people who've come to Jerusalem because of the sacrificial system, hoping that what they offer and what they do will provide them with some sort of forgiveness for the next year, that they'll be able to maybe encounter something like the divine. Wake up and be immersed, every one of you, into the name of Jesus Christ, so that your sins may actually be forgiven. That's been done. That's a done deal. And you'll receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. This promise is for you. The word there is plural. And for your children, for those who will follow you, people you haven't met yet, and for all those who are far away, everyone whom the Lord God calls to him. And Peter testified with many other arguments and exhorted them, saying, "Save yourselves from this corrupt generation." This here is where the Bible finally tells us, what is it we're being saved from? Peter put it in the first sermon: be saved from this corrupt generation. He says, look around. This isn't working for any of us. Look around. Be saved from this corrupt generation. The system of systems that's no good for anybody. The word corrupt there in the original Greek is scolios. And right away you can hear the word that we made out of that. Scoliosis is when your spine, which is supposed to be strong and true and be able to carry the weight to the benefit of the rest of the body, it can't. There's something wrong with it. It's just a matter of how much, to what degree it's been warped and weakened, and it's crooked, and it can't do what it was made to do. And Peter says you're a group of people being invited to be saved from a corrupted, crooked culture, out of a way that's warped and isn't what it should be, and into the way of wholeness and strength that'll be good for you and for others, for your children, for those who are far off, for everybody. What you want is peace, and you want meaning, and you want joy, and you want belonging. you want unity. You ultimately can't get those things on the path that you're on. You're part of a system that's way too concerned with getting power and keeping it, of getting revenge on your oppressors, and by employing the tactics of your oppressors, by cutting corners and not being who you are. The road you're on isn't a good one. Here's an extended hand. The building is on fire. The ship is sinking. The disease is terminal. Be rescued from a corrupt society. See, reducing salvation to what happens to me after I die, it renders what the incarnate Christ stepped into as almost meaningless. The Christ stepped into so much unhealth in all of our human interactions. To reduce salvation to, no, it's about, do you have it all worked out for after you die? It makes what we are part of an almost irrelevant book club whose purpose is preparation to leave, not to actually live. And this is what so many of us are starting to wonder, if we have the courage to actually wonder it out loud. What's the point of all this Jesus stuff? I mean, maybe especially now, we can't even go to church. Like, what is the point of all of this? I still see the bumper sticker sometimes. I used to see it all the time, and now it's pretty rare, but I just saw it again recently. It says, "I'm not perfect, just forgiven." I'm not perfect, just forgiven. Which is, I guess, an admirable confession, but it also sort of speaks to the sheer irrelevance of the Jesus stuff. Like, don't expect too much from me, but at least I have a clean conscience. I don't feel guilty anymore, but I'm not necessarily any different than I was before. And I'm certainly not participating in things becoming any different than they were before. So you can almost hear it baked into that. I'm not perfect, but I'm leaving. This narrowed and diluted definition of salvation, it focuses the attention unendingly on ourselves, because it makes salvation about getting ourselves diverted from unspeakable terror, getting our sons and our daughters and our friends and those close to us and our church diverted from unspeakable terror, which means that we're focused on ourselves and then another time and place, sometime later, which means we're of little use to the world that Jesus came to rescue, of little use to the world that God so loved, that Jesus was sent. And perhaps this is the real crux of it. The anxiety and threat and fear that come with constantly thinking that salvation is about getting things right or else. Language that didn't convert me. There was no or else in the tract. There was no or else in this mystical moment that I had. There's no or else in so much of what God is doing. But the anxiety and the threat and the fear that comes with so much believe, get it right or else, what it is a gateway to more self-interest, not less. More ego, not more and more like Jesus. The way of love is very poorly conceived if it's all predicated on get it right or else, because we can't be expansive. We can't be others-centered in the way of Christ if we're also in perpetual worry about what will happen to us and our loved ones if we get it wrong. You can't plan a surprise birthday party from the back of an ambulance. Love is about others, and fear is about me and my immediate interests. No matter what we tell ourselves, when I get this worked out, then I'll be generous, then I'll be about other people. But that day doesn't come for a lot of us. We're constantly asking, how am I doing? Am I getting it right? Am I doing and believing what I need to do and believe to stay out of eternal trouble? And am I properly sharing this news with others, in a way that's meaningful? And have I said it to enough people, or am I a disappointment in that way too? And it's a lot of pressure for us imperfect, forgiven people to be responsible to some large degree about other people avoiding being tortured forever. It's really a system of worry. And if being saved means getting and staying out of eternal trouble, then God has created a system by which we can only really have worry, not peace. But remember, the old proverb says, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. But it doesn't say it's the middle or the end of wisdom. We always fear initially what we don't understand. But as we come to understand Jesus, who says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I'm exactly what God is like. As we come to understand this Jesus, the more we come to understand why all the encounters with heavenly beings that human beings have in the Bible, they start with, do not be afraid. I know you're afraid, but you can relax. This isn't going to be bad for you. This is going to be good. And frankly, all of this is why Christians might need saving as much as anyone else, and perhaps more. Saved from the constriction of fear-based religion, saved from a brand of inclusion that requires exclusion, saved from nationalism that gets stamped with a cross, saved from disgust psychology disguised as holiness. Perhaps it's Jesus people who need rescued from being so stuck in what's ultimately self-focused worry. More than anybody. We're not invited to be saved from God's ugly side. We're invited to be saved to everything you and I have forgotten that we are, because our counterfeits have always been so dang convincing. But even as they are convincing, they cause us so much pain because they're the opposite of peace. They're the opposite of justice. Because the kingdom of self is really the animal kingdom. It's hierarchical and it's competitive. It's dog eat dog. There have to be losers if there's going to be winners. There has to be awful news if there's to be good news. And so the counterfeit, as convincing as it is always asking, what about me? What about my immediate concerns and those I'm immediately concerned with? It can't really ask questions about what about others. Not very far out. It's not equipped to love of other as self. And it's that counterfeit is so deeply rooted that even now as I'm saying this, I would assume there are people listening to it and they feel threat. And wait a minute, this sounds too good. These criticisms don't sound like we're criticizing the wrong thing. This sounds too good, too attractive. Doesn't it have to be bad if it's good? Doesn't it have to have an ugly side if it's to be just? It's so ingrained in us that we have trouble even reevaluating something that's been in our minds this long. And as somebody with a sales background, trust me, I get this impulse. I really do. Back in college, I sold vacuum cleaners. And the way that I did it is I told you that the vacuum that you owned, well, the way that I put it is, didn't suck. It was trash. I had to put down what you had. And then I also had to say, if you don't buy my product, well, then you're basically, your carpet is going to be ground zero for all manner of disease. And it's basically neglecting your children to not buy my product and get your house as clean as it should be. That's how I did it. I sold tires, and the way that I did it is I said our brand was superior to all the other guys, and to not put these tires on your car, you're basically just saying, when the snows come in December, I'm okay with my car spinning out and me and my kids end up in a ditch. That's the level of consciousness that I would apply. I sold warehouse and distribution services and RF technology and all the software that comes with that. And the way that I did it was explaining the other guys, their customer service, the competitive brands, it's awful. You're not going to get any customer service. They'll mistreat you. They'll neglect you. And without our equipment and service in this competitive industry, the end of your business is nigh. It was that thing that it's that really old trick. You've seen the rest, now come get the best. It's what our brand has always said about the other guys, and there's a place for that, I guess, if you're selling widgets. But the way that it works is something has to be under threat. There has to be an ultimatum. Something has to be put down. Other competitive claims have to be put down. But understand, the presence of Christ, the one who's always saving us, always redeeming us, is always offering us rescue from our designs. It doesn't make competitive claims to our counterfeit ways of being. It doesn't make competitive claims or threaten us into living, but wakes us up to all the ways that we just haven't been living. Wakes us up to all the ways that we just haven't been awake. To be included in this, in the saved, is to be part of an awakening human species, gradually coming to remember who we are, whose image we're made in, and what we're part of. It's an offered hand. It's not a threat. It's not an ultimatum. And the effects of this are so beautiful and so relevant, and relevant to the world around us in very real ways. It's not, well, maybe spiritually relevant. No, just relevant. Spiritual is a terrible adjective. Everything is included in God's care. Everything is included in what Jesus is saving. Some within Christian circles, they speak derisively of social justice warriors or a social gospel. And I'm here to tell you, social gospel is redundant. If the gospel doesn't have a social component to it, then it's not good news. It has to be good news for the actual world that we live on, or it doesn't actually matter, and it's not good. What this criticism is sort of rooted in is this understanding that the gospel is primarily, and for some people only, about being properly diverted from eternal conscious torment through properly striking a deal with Jesus, and that is not the gospel. The gospel is the kingdom. What Jesus says, the gospel is the immediacy and the availability of the kingdom. It's in your midst. Don't go looking for it. It's right here, and it's open no matter where you are or who is currently on some throne somewhere making claims about what he or she is running. It's right here. The gospel is about a kingdom run by a king who is also a servant, which means we are led and served by the Almighty, no matter who we are or who we aren't, what we know or don't know. The gospel is the invitation of the kingdom to wake up to this way and to join Jesus in being healed and becoming a healer according to our influence and our abilities and our talents, to join Jesus into this kind of healing. When he said, follow me, he said, follow me into the world into which I was born for its rescue, not follow me out of here because this place is hopeless. And as jarring as this might feel to some of us, because of our assumptions, what we've learned or taught or caught about salvation, doesn't it encourage us to know that the way of Jesus applies to our actual lives, to our actual world, and to our actual reality, not just intangible spiritual things that only become important after we die? Isn't it an encouragement to know that we're not just forgiven? We are forgiven, but that's just part of a huge discussion about being redeemed redeemers, heading into the world that's forgotten, that it is made in the image of love, that people have the capacity for love and goodness and peace, and that the way of Christ wakes that up in us. This is the work that God has always been up to. This is a salvation that matters. Isn't that an encouragement? One of my favorite stories comes from the 19th chapter of Luke. Reads this way. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. To be a chief tax collector is to be in charge of people who take way more taxes than are necessary, because it's basically a pyramid scheme. Pay what Rome wants, keep the rest. It really leaves people destitute. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to Zacchaeus, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. And all who saw this began to grumble and said, "Well, he's gone to be the guest of one who's a sinner." Turns out like Jesus is just like all the other guys. He just wants, a seat at the powerful table. He's going to join the corruption. He's one of them, not one of us. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham, a son of the tradition of faith. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." Did you notice that Zacchaeus hasn't done anything yet? He's just standing there talking about his intentions. And people say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Apparently the road to salvation is too. He hasn't done anything yet. He just says, there's some things I was unwilling to face, some things that I just would not wake up to, but in the presence of the Christ, I'm just admitting it. I'm saying it right now. I can see the damage I have caused, and I will make it right. And Jesus says salvation has come to this house today. This awakening that has happened for Zacchaeus and Zacchaeus' household will immediately affect people in Jericho and the region. It's immediately going to do incredible things, disruptive things to the local economy. because now this system that was only benefiting those at the top would ostensibly be flipped over and benefit those who were being oppressed by this corruption, by this scolios. And Jesus says, salvation has come to this house today. Not, okay, well then hurry up and pray this prayer, and then someday after you die, the slate will be clean, having no good effect on the world around Zacchaeus. It's today, salvation has come to this house. You get it, which means it's going to bless so many people. By the way, Jesus' name, Yeshua, roughly translates in Hebrew, God saves. So there's sort of a pun at work here too. Salvation has come to this house in every way. And Zacchaeus can see something he was unwilling to see, repents of it, and he's saying, this house has been on fire for a long time, and I'm going to take your hand, because I want out of this thing. And it's not just going to benefit the eye, it's going to benefit Zacchaeus' world. I get asked all the time, what can I tell my friend to make them believe in Jesus? Or what can I tell my kids so that they'll be saved? Or are there any books I can give my sibling that will open the door to salvation? And I say to them, as I'll say to you, salvation is a person. It's an embodied, incarnate person who invites us in our own context to disbelieve the systems that we've settled for, to disbelieve the systems that we've created to attempt to remedy our superficial interests or our lusts and our appetites, to rescue us from the systems we've put in place that are really just more power struggles. It's just another king of the hill, another tug of war. Systems that have us using one another and scapegoating one another, trying to figure out how can I be a respected, cherished winner, even at the expense of others. The Spirit of Christ is always, always, always present to us, whispering the invitation of rescue from all of the complex structures that we erect, that we erect in God's name. With God and Bible words all over them. We are always being invited out of that, all of that we've designed to preserve our own power and our own interests. We're always being invited by salvation, that Jesus comes to us, the Spirit of Christ comes to us saying, there's another way, and it's how you're actually meant to live. And it's always been this way. It's always, always, always what God has wanted. It's always a challenge God has been speaking to us all the way back. Generations before the ministry of Jesus, the prophet Micah records in the 6th chapter, and what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. This rescues the world from itself. To walk with the Spirit of God, to do justice, and to love kindness, to embody what Christ was all about in our own context. And as I said at the top, I can't deal with this idea exhaustively or satisfactorily for everybody, but I think we must reevaluate what we believe Jesus is offering us and what our faith and salvation actually mean beyond what we previously believed. Because this really isolating and disorienting moment that we're all in has only magnified the so what of faith and its relevance. This whole Jesus saves thing. Is this meaningful now, or is this all just a really difficult waiting room for some other existence after we die, if we strike the right deal? But I hope what is becoming clear is that this world, this life, sprawling out from this moment eternally, but no less including, and frankly, primarily, is about the moment that we actually inhabit. I hope it's becoming clear that this is what Jesus is saving. That we are part of a very important and joy-filled and fear-free mission with no ultimatums, to go and to love in even the most simple circumstances. It's not detached from our lives. It's about our moment-to-moment lives. So being rescued, being saved, being plucked from the bottomless pit of self-interest and the systems of self-interest that we've settled for, even though they function at other people's expense, we're being rescued from those. And so that affects little things, little mundane things like how we talk. That it's not now, so I'm saved and so I don't use dirty words. There's no such thing as dirty words. There's words we don't like and words that we like. The idea of it being dirty comes from this idea of purity, that I don't want to soil myself because that will make God turn up God's nose at me. The reason that we change the way that we speak if we're part of the people who are being saved is because we've come to recognize that my words affect other people, often negatively. That my words can put people on the defensive, and that never helps. That my words can dehumanize, and what people need to be reminded of is how beloved they are, not how subhuman they are. That now is why I change my speech, not because I'm concerned about God being angry at me and it nullifying my contract, but because I'm starting to wake up to how important words are to us to love. Being saved affects our generosity. I give not because God gets mad if I don't give or becomes disappointed in my selfishness, or if I give a lot, God will pay me back double or triple like the prosperity gospel promises. It's just garbage. The reason I give is because I'm coming to understand that our Father means we're all siblings, and my resources are actually my family's resources. So of course I have a responsibility to those in my own household, and to those I have a financial responsibility too, but this is ours. I'm generous not because somebody's threatening me. I give because what else would I do when I'm waking up to the illusion of separateness? We are all one family. This affects even the simplest of disciplines. We're saved from the notion that good and moral people are people who work really, really hard. That's ingrained in a lot of us. You're not a good, hard-working person until you work 70 hours a week. That's a lie. That's an American lie. Good and moral people sometimes don't have jobs. Good and moral people are honest and vulnerable and available and kind and inclusive and helpful. And they radiate kindness to others. They don't use others. So the way that we discipline ourselves to work hard isn't just that we show up for our jobs. Of course we do that, and we work hard at our jobs, but that we recognize, no, there's something deeper than that makes us who we are. To be saved affects how we think about mundane things like our calendars. We're saved from the isolation that comes from things like I just try to work really, really hard and then, I go lay down somewhere. We discipline ourselves to be in relationship with other people, to deepen those relationships, because human beings have to be in relationships. That's why Tirza at the top of the hour talked about being in a student group or being in an adult group. Not because we want to busy people with our church ministries. We don't want busier people. We just recognize that being in contact with each other, with some sort of frequency and some sort of rhythm, some sort of discipline, is more important now than ever. It's a nutrient that human beings must have to be in overlap with other human beings and to be known by them, to know and to be known by them. So we want you to sign yourself up for a small group and for your kids to be in a small group, not to validate the ministry, but because it's part of how we say yes to being saved from what happens when we don't make it a priority to be in genuine interaction with each other. Being saved affects little things like how we inhabit a moment. We turn off our phones and we go breathe deeply because why? I'm being rescued from constant distraction and needing to be entertained and needing to get that hit off of what the latest breaking news is, to get that hit off of did my post get more likes? And I just put that down for a while and I just go breathe for a little bit because I am being rescued from the need to be anywhere but here. Being saved rescues us from not seeing or hearing each other. To be a person of salvation is to say, I employ the work of seeing and hearing and validating and affirming everything that I can in other people. I'm being rescued from only listening to people I agree with or listening to people I disagree with because I'm already forming my argument and my put down and my shame. I'm being saved to actually encounter other people, and I'm being rescued from the notion that I can't be in the presence of people I disagree with because that is either a waste of time or it's threatening or it's some sort of liability to me. No, we're rescued from that. Instead, I can be there for others. I can prop up their interests. I can disagree and still say, but yeah, it makes sense how you got there. That's not my conclusion. I can defend someone else more than myself because I can love more than demanding to be loved. I'm saved from the bottomless pit of self. And in this and a million other ways, we are saved moment to moment by the Spirit of the Christ who came to us and did not threaten and did not issue an ultimatum, but said, I'm inviting you into something deeper, something more, something beautiful, something more in keeping with who you actually are. In every moment, if we'll listen, because it's quiet, in every moment of our real lives, we're being offered rescue, not from something, but to something more in keeping with who we actually are. We just forgot because our counterfeits have been so good, so believable, that is. In every moment, there's a million different ways rescue and salvation are being offered to us. Wake up from the warped and the crooked system that you have settled for into something more, to something good. This is the good news. And so may we be people who say yes to these countless invitations offered to us every day to wake up, to receive love, and then to turn and with awakened minds and hearts, go and love, to do justice and to love kindness and to walk in every moment humbly with our God.
Thank you for joining us today, and welcome home. If you are in need of assistance during this crisis, please reach out at crosspoint.org/help.